All right, Frank McKinney, welcome to the Leaders Lab.
Ken, I have been waiting for this moment for so long. Listen, I heard about you from Nick Bradley,
Awesome.
and yeah, and I was on his podcast, and he said if you ever get a chance to do Ken's Leaders Lab, you got to do it. And I did. I think I did Nick's podcast over a year ago when my book just came out, and here we are. So
Very
very honored.
cool. Yeah, well, I'm so glad you're here. And you've got I mean, life for you has just been a wild ride. And I guess it started back in Indiana. And can you walk us through that a little bit? Like your early years and kind of pre-career?
Yeah, but believe it or not, I mean, I'm a lot less exciting than I look. I'm a corn-fed country boy from a small town in Indiana, known as Carmel, Indiana. I'm the oldest of six. I went to four high schools in 4 years, not because my dad was in the military, no, because I was asked to leave one school after the next. I finally graduated from a school run by Benedictine monks. So when I went to class, my teachers wore a hood and the apparatus tied together with a rope, this big robe.
Whoa.
It was a reform school. It was probably the worst thing my parents could have sent me to because I was there with a bunch of other delinquents. I had the greatest time of my life. But anyway, I left that school with a 1.8 GPA. My cumulative GPA over those 4 years in four high schools is 1.8. And I hopped a plane with a one-way plane ticket and a $50 bill. And I was in search of what I now know as, I didn't know then, of my professional highest calling, which then led to my spiritual highest calling. But who knows what either one of those are when you're 18. I spent 7 different stints in juvenile detention before I was 18. So my parents, being the oldest of 6, my parents needed me to get out of the house because I was having a pretty bad influence on my younger brother and 4 sisters. And I hit the tarmac literally because there weren't even when you departed from a plane, you went down the steps onto a tarmac. And I remember smelling that balmy, breezy air of Palm
Oh
Beach.
yeah.
Listen, going from a small farm in Indiana to Palm Beach was a culture shock.
Can I ask you, so a couple of questions here. One is, what was the deal? Like, what was getting you thrown in juvie all the time? Like, were you just wild? Were you acting up? Was there anything in particular, or were you just kind of rowdy?
As I've now had a therapist for quite a few years. I wish I had her earlier on. I learned later in life that I was addicted to excitement. Whatever form that excitement would come in, I was addicted to it. And most of the time when I was younger, almost all of the time, it was self-destructive. And so in one of my books, I've written 8 books in 6 different genres. In one of my books, I talk about how we don't really change. We just either reignite or we redirect. I redirected self-destructive tendencies, stealing cars and holding up convenience stores, selling drugs. My therapist says, Frank, you didn't need the car. You just loved the excitement of stealing it.
Right.
You didn't need the money. You loved the excitement of, robbing a store or something. And it's true. So as I became aware that I had this self-destructive tendency, being addicted to any form of excitement, I learned that, well, I didn't learn, but I came to understand that even the smartest psychiatrists like Freud and others say our core personality is formed by the age of 12. So everybody listening to your podcast right now is not going to change.
Mhm.
You're going to reignite something that's been buried beneath layers of repression or the way you were brought up, or you're going to redirect something, in my case, from self-destructive into constructive.
Mhm.
So for a living, for over 35 years, I've designed, built, and sold houses on the direct ocean front on speculation, meaning I had no buyer in mind.
Which gives you
So
that rush, like, right? Like, just gives you a massive, like, how are we going to do this? How are we going to pull it off? It's so much money, but when it does it, it's probably exhilarating. Yeah.
I found a constructive outlet for a destructive tendency, and it made me a lot of money, and I didn't have to change. So, I do a lot of talks at commencement, give commencement speeches and talk to high schools. I go to my last book tour, I went to juvenile detention centers and homeless shelters and abused women's facilities, veterans facilities, delivering that message of hope found in the fact that you cannot change. Quit trying to change, either redirect or reignite something that's been suppressed.
Because to recognize it, you can have choices, right? I mean, like, if it's like, well, if this is the way I am, then I can choose to engage with different outlets, right, that are going to be healthy. And I got to think, and I know we're not at this point in the story yet, but you have a lot of other outlets, right? Like I've never met anyone that's ran Badwater 12 times. I mean, I'm like, that's insane to me. And similar thought though. Yeah. Is it along the same thought process? Like, is it the rush of, there's so much unknown, I think, in that race, right? It's not like running a half marathon where you're going to finish and everything's going to be okay. Is it tied to the same need?
Well, let's set the stage on what Badwater is for people who don't know. Badwater,
Sure.
according to the National Geographic, is the toughest foot race in the world. It's 135 miles run in the Death Valley Desert in the middle of July in 125-degree temperatures, ambient air temperatures. The pavement can be over 200 degrees, and you're running nonstop from the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere at 282 feet below sea level, all the way to the base of Mount Whitney, which is the highest point in the Western Hemisphere. And yeah, I've run it. I've participated 12 times. I've finished 7. I've failed 5. And there are a lot of people who are in recovery. I never was addicted to any drugs or anything, or I quit drinking when I was 21, not because I had an issue. Alcohol was a poison to me. You know, to live an extraordinary life, you must resist an ordinary approach is one of the chapters of one of my books. And ordinary for a 21-year-old was drinking and doing drugs and staying out all night and gambling and womanizing. And I'm like, you know what? These people I see in Palm Beach, who I actually was a tennis pro at the time, and I was teaching them how to hit a better forehand and backhand. They were living the lifestyles of rich and famous, Ken. That for those of you who are our age, you will remember on TV called Lifestyles of Rich and Famous. If you're younger, MTV Cribs is a very similar format. And I wanted that lifestyle, but I had no education, no network, no friends, no money. I decided to jettison all these things that were getting in the way of being extraordinary, which were ordinary drinking and all the other stuff. And I had this monomaniacal focus to leave a legacy that I and my family, now I've been married 33 years, could be proud of. And that was in the form of, yes, in the real estate, but this Badwater race, as you brought up, it taught me with faith, patience, and the passage of time, you can get through anything. And I was one step away from the couch as a couch potato. I mean, I was a tennis pro, I was fit, I was a fast twitch muscle kind of guy. But running 135, my average finish time is 44 hours, nonstop.
Yeah, it's
so
insane.
you know, the hallucinations, the sleep deprivation, the heat exhaustion, the things I went through. But I made it to that finish line 7 times, and I only had 4 hours to spare. The cutoff is 48 hours. So you know, in life, you're going to be presented with the impossible, the insurmountable, and the inconceivable. The 3 I's, I call them. Running 135 miles in 125-degree heat over nonstop. That's the 3 I's: incomprehensible, impossible, and you know, the third one. And you got 2 choices, man. You can say yes, or you can say no. And when you're sitting on your front porch in that rocking chair, you're going to have regrets in life. No matter what, you will have regrets. I'd rather regret what I did rather than what I didn't do.
Do you I'm sure you've read Goggins' book before. If you I love, and I'm misquoting him a little bit, but I'm just remembering him talking about, kind of meeting his creator and always having kind of this thought of what he could have done or what he could have gave, but like didn't, due to resistance, due to pain, due to comfort, and he just never wanted to be in that position, and that was part of what drove him, is just like leaving everything out on the table, even though it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. So I raced against Goggin 3 times in Badwater.
Oh, wow.
I beat him once. He beat me once, and one time neither one of us finished.
Wow.
I've met him. I know him pretty well. Matter of fact, he endorsed my most recent book. So,
amazing.
I mean, I'm just gonna sit there one day. Hopefully, I get to that point where I'm retired in my 80s, and I have no regrets failing at Badwater 5 times. I have no regrets in 2010 losing tens of millions of dollars when the real estate market crashed, because I had a $30 million spec house on the market.
Right.
I'm going to regret not trying those things.
Right.
Well, I'm not going to not regret. I may say, man, should I have built that spec house in the middle of the pandemic, or that was kind of stupid, or did you race in Badwater at age 60? You failed. I mean, but at least I tried. Those are the kind of regrets I want to have. Things that I did, not what I didn't do.
Absolutely. I mean, rather than looking back at the time you stood on the sidelines and never jumped into the game at all. I mean, which is crazy. So you've done so let me I want to stay a minute with, so you're a kid and you're in Indiana and things aren't going all that well, but there's something inside you that says, I need to get out of Dodge. I need to do something different. I mean, you had some kind of epiphany. Was it a moment or was kind of a buildup of kind of what was going on?
When you're 18, you have control of this metaphorical eraser that you can turn around to the chalkboard of life and basically almost every day erase what was.
True.
The
Yeah.
older we get, the harder that is to do. So at 18, listen, the prospect of leaving cold Indiana in January, I left January 11th, and landing in Palm Beach, man, it didn't take much more than that. You know, there were girls there, there was warm temperature there. I was getting out from underneath people chasing me that I owed money to, and my parents were, sending me to boarding school. So taking that metaphorical eraser out and saying, look, this is a chance for you to start completely fresh. And I did. I killed the person I was born to become the person I wanted to be. I'm going to repeat that. So my second to last book is titled Aspire, Aspire, and we're going to get into that in a second. Why aspiration wins out over inspiration and motivation. But the subtitle of that book is How to Create Your Own Reality and Alter Your DNA. I was born to be one of two things: a banker, because my grandfather and father were one. Well, good luck with a 1 point GPA and becoming a banker, or a criminal. I didn't want either one of them. So the day I got on that plane, many, many years ago, and flew from Carmel, Indiana, or Indianapolis to Palm Beach, I killed the person I was born to be, which was one of those two things, to become the person I wanted to be. That's aspiration.
What at 18 years old flipped that switch? Because that's a very evolved way to think. That, I mean, was it desperation? What was it? Out of
No,
options?
you know what? You're giving me too much credit for my intellect back then. I'm doing a lot of this conversation where everybody's post-mortem, meaning I'm looking back and understanding
Sure.
what I was thinking subconsciously. No, it was, I'm tired of being in trouble. I'm tired of having my beautiful mother turn prematurely gray because of my behavior. I'm tired of being locked up in juvenile detention, because after 18, I'm not going to juvenile detention. I'm going to jail anymore. And I want the warmth and I want the girls. I mean, it's basically that simple.
Sure.
And I was on my own, man. I believe in the welfare system. I believe in the entitlement systems, but I don't believe in the welfare mentality.
Right.
The entitlement mentality. So I had a job digging sand traps on a golf course, earning $180 a week, literally by hand, before they had the mechanized ditch digging equipment, by hand digging sand traps, earning $180 a week with a bunch of Haitians. And that's where I earned this nickname, the White Haitian, because of my work ethic. I busted my ass. I was out there at 4 a.m. working on those golf courses. I'd sworn off all unhealthy vices and temptations, and I was going to turn it around. I didn't listen. I furnished my apartment with two other maintenance workers out of Woolworth. If you remember, for those of you my age, this was before, Walmart put them out of business. Woolworth was like a little 5 and dime. I had basically that left, a $5 bill and a dime. I bought 4 milk cartons. I used that as the base of my mattress. I bought a raft. That was my mattress. It was my couch. And then on the weekend, though, Ken, I would drag that raft out to the beach, float in the ocean, and dream about what I might amount to someday.
Nice.
And being around affluence. Listen, I worked on a golf course where it seemed like these rich people played golf all day and never went to work. It's not that I wanted to play golf. I don't really care for golf too much, but I wanted the lifestyle, man. How? And at night, I'd watch it on TV, Lifestyle of the Rich and Famous. I'd watch it. So I became enamored with the kind of the trappings of the materialism, the consumerism, the excessism that an 18 to 20-year-old is going to be enamored by. And to get there, I worked my ass off on that golf course. I was transferred to the tennis courts as a maintenance worker. I was a good tennis player as a young boy. I picked up the tennis racket. I became a certified teaching professional, went from $4 an hour to $50 an hour. I was making $100,000 a year as a teaching professional. Whoa. I bought a Ferrari at 21. But the most important thing I learned, Ken, was, let's say I'm giving you a tennis lesson and you're 78 feet on the other side of the net. You drive up to your tennis lesson in your Mercedes. You've got a beautiful Beyonce lookalike wife. You got two beautiful kids. You got a mansion. You got a yacht. You've got the lifestyle. All I want from you is, in addition to the $50 you're going to pay me an hour, how'd you get there?
Mm-hmm.
How'd you get there? I cannot go back to school. Even a community college wouldn't take me. I'm going to go to school on the Kens of the world who I'm teaching tennis to. So what I did, and this is in actually my very first book that came out 20 years ago called Make It Big. I tired my tennis students out after 45 minutes purposely. They were too tired to finish an hour-long lesson. And I sat them down, and over a 2-year span, I earned my master's in entrepreneurship and my PhD in real estate through picking the brains of the ultra wealthy. And almost all their anecdotal answers to my questions pointed back to real estate was the answer to how they got their riches and how I ultimately attained mine.
I love it. So you're just hitting forearms from every side of the court, making them run, and finally you can just see it coming, right? You're like, okay, they're almost mine, and now you're taking off the shoes and just kind of BSing and making it all look organic. That's amazing. So what happens? You're there, you're already making good money. So you knew, because you're seeing this common thread from them or hearing this common thread of real estate, you decide at that point in your early 20s, that's the path?
So over a 2-year span, and I'm going to give you just a simple dialogue between me and a student.
Sure.
So here's Frank. Frank says, actually, I was going by Mickey back then. Mickey says, so Ken, how'd you make your money? Well, I was a successful trial lawyer. You know, I won a lot of money in court at the settlement table, but with my first winning, I bought a duplex.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay, what's it? I didn't even know what a duplex was.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Frank, it's a unit that I rented out, and I got $300 a month positive cash flow. Well, Ken, I make that much in a day. Why would I? No, Frank, you don't understand. I'm now 50 years old, and I've got 60,000 rental units paying me $600 a month. That's $36 million a month. If you hear that story once, a story like that once, it's fascinating, it's entertaining. But what if you heard a story like that with this real estate anecdotal happy ending 25 times?
Mm-hmm.
So contrary to no money down and other people's money, I didn't know any of that stuff. I saved my money. Remember, a lot less exciting. Is this viewable or just listenable?
Listenable, but they'll pull some video clips too. Yeah.
So you look at me and you'll say, man, that guy looks like he's fun to party with. Well, no, I swore off all that stuff. I saved 36 grand from baking out there in the hot sun, and I bought a freaking crack house. I flipped it, fixed it up and flipped it. And by the way, flipping was something that was done in gymnastics. It wasn't something done in real estate back then. And I made 7 grand, and it could have been monopoly money. I was so proud of proving the concept of buying an undervalued commodity, adding value to it like nobody else, marketing it like nobody else, even if it was a $50,000 crack house, and making a decent margin. So, I did that for 5 years. Malcolm Gladwell says to be an expert at anything, you got to put in 10,000 hours. Well, 10,000 hours is 5 years full time. And for 5 years, I didn't do a house worth more than 100 grand. Wow. I did hundreds of them. And you know what? I got in my real estate book, I talk about getting good at the craft of real estate, not the business, but the craft of real estate. And I became a real estate artist. I always wanted to be able to sing or play an instrument or sculpt or paint. I can't. I build 3-dimensional art that very wealthy people pay upwards of $2,000 a square foot to live in my 3-dimensional art. So we went from $50,000 crack houses up to 100. And I didn't do a house. From that point, I jumped from 100, Ken, to 2.2 million. There was nothing in between, because I knew I was good enough at the craft of real estate that it didn't matter how many zeros were behind the acquisition and ultimate selling price.
You had proven it to yourself, and that allowed you to jump those brackets. I'm wondering, the whole real estate artist, that took place pretty early though, right? Like even when you were buying these undervalued properties, these lower cost properties, you were trying to add something or do something a little bit different, right? It wasn't just all about laying Formica and the cheapest sink or whatever, right?
You know what? It took almost 20 years to be recognized by the Wall Street Journal. They used the words. I didn't use them, but I always thought them. I always manifested this real estate artist like persona.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, back in my $100,000 crack houses, it was, 3 coats of paint instead of 1. It was $20 a yard carpet instead of 10. It was a new roof instead of just patching the old one. It was grass sod instead of grass seed. They were the nicest little crack houses on the block when I got done with them. And I was selling them for 105% of retail. I was making markets where they hadn't existed before. I just carried that confidence after 5 years of, mind you, my first house I made $7,000 on. So by the time we were done with that price point, which was 100,000 and below, and by the way, that's like a first time home buyer in the late 80s, early 90s, first time home buyer price point. Right now it might be 250,000, but it's equal. It's all equal. Just go back, take out inflation. So I took that confidence of multiple transactions. We had spread our margins from basically 7%, which is at $7,000, to 25% per house. We were making 25 grand on $100,000 houses. And one day we were driving to church. I forgot to set my clock back, so I had an hour to kill with my wife. We drove past a house on the ocean that looked like a crack house. 2 weeks of uncollected newspaper, 2 months of uncut grass, broken windows, torn screens, but it was on the ocean. I turned to her and said, honey, I'm not a gambler, by the way, Ken. I won't put a quarter in a slot machine. But basically I said, let's put it all on black. Let's sell everything we own, including our lifestyles, the rich and famous house we were living in, her Mercedes, my cars. We moved into an efficiency that was so small you could flip the eggs from the shower. And I put 400 grand into that house, borrowed another 350 grand, bought it for 775, and fixed it up and sold it for about $1.5 million. And from there, that was in 1993. So yeah, 30 years later, we've done 44 of those houses, with the most expensive being a $50 million house that had 18 bedrooms, 24 bathrooms, and a 16-car garage.
I love that you were willing to, that wasn't just an investment. That was a complete, like you said, we're putting it all on black. You already had built a good lifestyle. You had something to lose. You weren't anymore the kid from Indiana with just $50 in his pocket. You had built something, and you were willing to not gamble again, but risk it, certainly, to do something. You had that much confidence, it sounds like, that it would work.
Let's get this really clear to your listeners, because to live a full life, you must exercise your risk tolerance like a muscle. You must exercise your risk threshold like a muscle. If you do so, eventually it will become stronger and able to withstand greater pressure. So most people think of that first $2.2 million house as a big jump, or a $50 million house as a big jump. No, the big risk was leaving my 9-to-5, my cubicle. Nobody's born a real estate investor. My 9-to-5 was the tennis court that was putting 100 grand in my pocket before the IRS existed. Basically, I was getting paid in cash, didn't know anything about paying taxes. I left that for a crack house that had used condoms, used needles, a stench that you couldn't believe, put a mask on before masks were things, and turned that thing into a beautiful piece of real estate art. So I exercised my risk tolerance on those smaller properties. I built it up so that when I jumped to 2.2 million, listen, I paid 750 grand for that. The most I had paid for a property before that was 75,000. Wow. Maybe a house I didn't need to do much to. I could, put a coat of paint on and flip it for 100. What's the difference between 75,000 and 750 grand?
Yeah, it's just 10x, right? But it's the same theory.
It's a zero. Yeah. It's a zero.
Yeah.
So I was more terrified leaving the tennis court and the security of my little cubicle, my 9-to-5, than I was jumping from 2 million to 4 million to 6 to 8 and all the way up to 50 million.
Right.
And then I realized, listen, and this is we'll take this off in a different direction when it's time, but I had a professional highest calling from God that was creating these houses, designing them, building them, furnishing them down to the gold-plated toothbrush in the bathroom, linens in the closet, towels in the bathroom, and even cars in the garage, and selling them for, like I said, upwards of $2,000 a square foot. We set numerous records over the years in Palm Beach County, price per square foot in South Florida. That was my professional highest calling. And yet it came years after years and years of exercising my risk tolerance like a muscle. It became so strong and was able to withstand any pressure that I chose to put on it.
Can we venture into your role in your charity work in Haiti? And it sounds like the foundation for that was back on the golf course. Yeah.
Can we save that for last?
Of course.
I'm going to tie that all in at the end. where we go from your professional highest calling to your spiritual highest calling. By the time we're done, your listeners are going to be moved from rich to enriched. And I'll say,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. No problem. Yeah. So where does it go from there then? You're building the houses out. You've got 44 properties over the last 30 years. I know that I know that you've recently unretired, but can you walk us through kind of the in-between stage there?
Yeah. So, it wasn't always about upping the ante when it came to price. I maxed out on price at $50 million back in I think that was '06. I mean, it's a long time ago. And then I realized, you want to give, and I thought I came up with this before Steve Jobs did, but you want to give the ultra wealthy what they want before they know they want it. I never knew that was something he said, but I've always said it. And at that time, the trend was, I believe it was shifting away from 20,000 square feet and having 4 houses all over the world to maybe, 5 to 7,000 square feet. So we started building these micro mansions, which was basically taking the same finishes I would put in 25,000 square feet and putting them into 10,000 square feet and under. I even did one at 3,000 square feet. It didn't sell for 50 million, but on a per square foot basis, it set a record. I think it was $2,600 a square foot. So we would toy around with that, making another market, which was smaller houses, because then nowadays, Ken, those people have houses in 8 countries, and they don't need these massive. Actually, I should say in the last couple of years, it's been trending back towards these mega mansions again. I'm watching it kind of history repeat itself. We would toy around with styles. Like I traveled to the south of France and I built a house that was very French style. Then we go to Bali and Haiti, or Bali and Indonesia and Tahiti and Fiji, and build a Hawaiian style house. So we were always, these were one-offs. These were when we sold them, we had to destroy the plans, according to most people that bought the houses from us, because they didn't want these things duplicated. That's the artistry. That's the Van Gogh, Renoir, Monet, only they're living inside that painting instead of putting it on a wall. And then I felt like I'd reached the kind of the max of my career. I did this about 2.5, 3 years ago. I did this house in Palm Beach. Again, it was a beautiful house on the direct ocean front, maybe about $15 million, sold for over $2,000 a square foot, another record price per square foot. And then I said that was enough. I was done. I was really enjoying writing my books, touring my books. But I got bit by the bug in North Carolina. So I'm in Florida now, recovering from double knee replacement surgery that I only had 3 weeks ago. And we're starting to make a market. Just imagine if you could colonize the moon, and I'm doing that in a little town called Canton, North Carolina. So that part for me is, I think the artist in me will always be the main attraction versus the money. I never was motivated by the money. And by the way, our grand unveilings were very theatrical. They were themed events. They were choreographed. They were very expensive. They belonged in Vegas or on Broadway. But I was always just the opening act, Ken. I mean, you've got to be your own carnival barker. You've got to be your own ringmaster, your own megaphone, because you're not Apple, you're not Coke, you're not Kleenex. You're Ken, I'm Frank. My properties can't speak for themselves, and only 50,000 people out of a worldwide population of 8 billion can afford it. So I have no issue. Healthy ego. I talk about healthy ego in my Aspire book. 3 things. Have an otherworldly burning passion for your purpose. Passion isn't enough. Burning passion for your purpose. Check it. Being one of the best in the world at what you do. Not the best, because that's unhealthy ego. Being one of the best in the world at what you do. Check it. And the third thing that tells me if you have a healthy ego, or tells yourself, not being afraid to tell the world about your product or service. And man, did I ever shout it from the rooftops. And our average days on market over all those transactions was a little over, I think it was 54.5 days. The MLS keeps statistics for houses over 5 million. It's usually 14 months.
Yeah, I looked at some of your previously sold properties that went off in like a handful of days, right? Like 5 days or 9 days stuff. I don't remember all the numbers, but I saw some that went like that. I saw some that went like they were starter homes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you think about it, if you knew Van Gogh, Renoir, and Monet were painting a painting and you had the money, wouldn't you line up outside the museum or outside the gallery to buy it? I mean, so we did so much pre-marketing and pre-hype, and I used to have live cams on our properties that would show them being built in real time.
Mm.
I did stuff that nobody else did. So you could see this wasn't a concept. I wasn't some guy going to use your money to finish my house. Like you either buy it now or forever hold your peace because somebody's going to come along and pay us, full price or more.
That's awesome. Did social media play a big part in that as it came in the, I guess, second half of what you're doing, really? Right? Like, I would assume it played a bigger part in the like kind of mid 2000s till now.
You know what it does? It plays a bigger part in your brand building than it does. I use it for brand building. And if your brand is recognizable, then people are going to buy your product because I don't come with the house, but I'm the one who needs to get your attention to the front door.
Right.
And so part of that brand building process, and it's very well curated and cultivated, says that, yeah, we only, 44 houses on the ocean sounds like a lot, but over 30 years, it's a house and a half a year. I mean, it's not a lot. So if you want to be a part of that, you want one of those Van Gogh, Renoir, Monet hanging on your wall that you could live in, then, pay attention to our project as it comes along, because once it comes available, by the way, I never pre-sold them. I never did that. I always waited until they were done because the ultra wealthy want what they can't have. So I withheld it until it was done. And oftentimes we'd get a premium for doing so.
That's really cool. I would also think that just because it's the ultra wealthy and you being an artist, that would clash a little bit. If they get involved too early in the project, they're going to have little ideas, right, about what you should be doing and when you should be doing it. And it doesn't seem like that would fall in too well with what you're trying to do.
I'll tell you what, of those 44 transactions, I did two, what you are now referring to as custom homes. Like they bought them so early. I lost, like I had two relatives working for me. They ended up suing me and leaving. I used all my energy and all my gift for somebody else's, I wouldn't even say vision. Like there's, you're working for a couple, let's say it's you and your wife, and the house will take at least 2 years to build, right? It's a big house. It takes a long time. And I'm there arguing, or not arguing, I'm having to present 14 different shades of white on the wall. Come on now. I got to waste time with that. So I from that point, the last one I did was in 08. The last custom I did, I swore them off. I will never do another one again, no matter how much money you want to throw at me, because I'm going to build, either you're going to love it or you're going to hate it. And I don't care if you hate it. I just need one person to love it.
Well, exactly. It doesn't matter if you hate it. Don't buy it, right? I mean, somebody else can buy it. So what I know you started touching on it here with North Carolina, but so when you sold the $50 million house, were you kind of, I guess, mentally, were you like you were saying, hey, I've kind of done what I need to do here. You're focused on your books. You're focused on, so you said it actually was North Carolina that's kind of brought out the real estate artist once again, or what specifically about that? You said you're building a bit of your own community up there. Is that what's really inspiring it? And is your new stuff all up there?
I think I'll go back to that statement of colonizing the moon. Like in this little town, North Carolina, reminds me a lot of Delray Beach when we first came here. Undiscovered, undervalued, unappreciated. The three uns in real estate that you look for to add value to. And Delray Beach is south of Palm Beach and it's north of Boca Raton. So it's the redheaded stepchild. This little town in North Carolina, it ain't Asheville, it ain't Waynesville. It's this little kind of redneck town called Canton. And I think we're going to I know we're going to put it on the map, to the extent that we want to put it on the map. That's exciting to me. If I was 20 years younger, I would go full force in trying to put that, that town over the top. But now, do a handful of projects, if that, one at a time is what I say now. I got nothing left to prove. I'm really enjoying, and this will segue into the question you asked before, the charity work. In the late 90s, I was on the cover of the Miami Herald for selling the most expensive spec house in the history of Palm Beach County. And on the cover of the magazine, or the newspaper, was this picture of me with my arms raised in triumph. And so, you've been in the newspaper before. Everybody listens, you've been in the newspaper before. Mm-hmm. The day that article came out, I went to the newsstand. This is back when we read newspapers, like, crisp, snap them open and read them. Sure. I put a quarter in. I pulled 10 copies out because I knew I was going to give them to my friends. I wasn't going to sit there and keep feeding quarters. I went home. I looked at that picture. I snapped it open, and sure enough, there's the article. There's the picture. There's the house. Everything's quoted right. It was like a perfect commercial written for me. But I looked deep into my eyes, Ken, and something was amiss. Something was off. Something was actually fake. And then I snapped that paper back, and on the other side of the page was an article about a homeless man that was being fed by a soup kitchen out from underneath the overpass in I-95. And if you do stick in any video, if I choose not to put a flat iron in my hair and all the other hair care product stuff I use, and I don't shave for a while, I could look homeless real easy. Mm-hmm. There, but for the grace of God, go I. The guy looked exactly like me, yet he was living under a bridge. I was this close to living under a bridge with that track record of detention centers 7 times and 4 high schools. And I got to wondering, I took a right turn that landed me on the right side of the page. What in the world did this guy do to take the left turn and land on the wrong side of the page, the left side? This is Frank. This is the other guy. This is the other me. Could have been me. He had this smile on his face, like this joy that was heavenly, was angelic, and yet my smile was fake. I was hiding a deep depression because I had become so materialistic, so consumeristic, so egotistic that I began to take credit for all the success. And I'm a Christian, and so I had let all that run by the wayside, went prodigal son for the 10th time. And I went to my mentor and I asked him, Rich DeVos, who was the 65th richest person in the world. He was a co-founder of Amway. I think when he died, he was, worth $5 or $6 billion. He was a mentor of mine for 20 years. And he said, Frank, yeah, the look on your face, it's a fake smile because you haven't found your spiritual highest calling. You found your professional highest calling. You're really good at what you do for a living. But what are you doing with that living? You can only buy so many clothes, eat so much food, and put so many cars in your garage. In his case, so many planes in his hangar. You need to be a responsible steward for the blessings you've been given. And my son, you've been given a lot, given where you came from. And that really resonated. So as a simpleton, Ken, I went and started to volunteer at that soup kitchen called the Caring Kitchen. 1 hour a week for 1 day, right before Monday Night Football, remember, just serving meals to the homeless out of the back of that beat up old van. And I began to feel like all the soul I had lost in my heart, or all the heart I had lost out of my soul, was starting to come back. And I began to realize what a spiritual highest calling was just by feeding the homeless. Now, just like being a tennis pro wasn't enough, or being a maintenance worker wasn't enough, I wanted to do more than just feed them. I'm in the housing business. Shouldn't I be providing housing to the world's most desperately poor and homeless? Because I'm providing housing to the world's most wealthy. You don't even need another house. So in 2002, our Caring House Project Foundation was born. To date, we have built 30 self-sustaining villages in 22 different cities in the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere, that being Haiti. We have provided that self-sustaining existence to 13,600 plus or minus children that were eating dirt flavored with bouillon and lemon juice, literally eating mud patties flavored with lemon juice. So my mentor helped me understand and helped me dovetail my professional highest calling, selling houses to the world's most wealthy, and taking the proceeds of those sales, some of the proceeds, and now we have a ton of donors that donate to our Caring House, and providing housing and a self-sustaining existence to the most desperately poor and homeless in the world. That saved my life, Ken, because I was nearly ready to jump off a bridge back when I was on the cover of that magazine. So that there's a passage in the Bible, and don't let this turn you off if you're not into the Bible, if you're an atheist, agnostic, Hindu, Muslim, Jew. This is a great life mantra. Pretend it's inside of a fortune cookie. To whom much is entrusted, much is required. To whom much is given, much is expected. That is my life mantra. And you might say that's easy for you to fulfill, Frank, because you've done well. I'm not referring to whom much money is given. Time, talent, and treasure. You may not have the treasure. You may not even have the talent, but I had the time to go serve meals 1 hour a week out of the back of that beat up old van that led to me sharing my talent and ultimately my treasure. So that alone has kept me in the real estate business maybe 20 years longer than I needed to be, because I
Right.
had a purpose now. Build the
Right.
big one so we can build the small ones in Haiti.
It's like a new drive behind you, a new inspiration for there's an outcome. I mean, I think that feeling you were feeling when you're on the cover of the Miami Herald, and I think for all of us, especially, I'm guessing you were probably in your 30s still at the time, and it's that, you know, if I grind it out, if I go become the best at something or one of the best in the world at something, and I make a lot of money as a result, and do something really good, then I'll feel, you know, kind of an if then statement. If I do this, then I'm going to feel awesome, or I'm going to be successful. And then I think to get to that destination and realize it's like it's hollow is, yeah, I mean it can cause depression, it can cause suicide, it can cause everything. And I feel like the more successful people I've talked to, and my own experiences is, you know, old Tony Robbins saying the secret to living is giving. And I mean, I think until you get aligned with some level of contribution and service, I think, like you're saying, spiritual higher power, or spiritual higher connection. If you can't find that, I mean, I bet billionaires that you would think are dirt poor because they're you know, mentally they're deprived, and they are living in a state of feeling depleted all the time, or living in a state of scarcity because, again, they're just missing this other component. It's so good to find it. And like you said, it doesn't need to be, you don't need to build $50 million spec houses to find that. It can be the hour at the soup kitchen or whatever you can do, you know. It's amazing.
You know, that's this kind of the last section of my book, Aspire, and it talks about with aspiration you can change the world, and that's so cliche. But when we build a village in Haiti, and typically there's 400 to 500 people in that village, 40 to 50 houses, the community center, a school, a church, a clinic, renewable food, clean drinking water, and some form of free enterprise, because I am not in the welfare business. Once we're done, we're done. We're not coming back to help. We're 30 for 30. They've never asked for help because we provide the free enterprise element so they can be self-sustaining. You know, when I complete that loop and I go to cut the ribbon on one of those villages, and I see the look in one child's eyes, right, and he's not eating dirt anymore, I change the world, because you know what? The world isn't seen through the eyes of 8 billion. It's seen through the eyes of one.
Hmm.
So when I changed the world for that little boy, I didn't just change his world. I changed the world, because his world is the only world. So quit thinking that you have to. Let me just warn you that the pursuit of material things and thinking that the success that you're going to learn from the leaders lab, right?
Yep.
The leaders lab is going to put more cars in your garage or clothes in your closet. The energy you put into the pursuit of those things, that favor is never returned in this with the same energy you put into it. It will never be returned. I know people who are very successful, and you're right, I've met quite a few billionaires that I've sold to that aren't very happy, that could, you know, they could they could buy a new Lamborghini, roll it off the lot, and before the first tank of gas is gone, man, they're already feeling the emptiness.
Mm.
So please understand that that pursuit of whatever material things you want and the energy that you put into it and all the thought, and it's not going to be returned for very long. I can promise you that. I learned that lesson pretty early. That's why I drive a Yugo. For those of you who are younger than 40,
Yeah, man.
look at go look it up. That's my daily driver since 2006. I got two of them. I got a convertible and I got a hardtop. Because I mean, I've been through all the cars in the world. I learned that lesson. They don't return the favor.
I love that. I love that saying. And tell us, you know, what's life like for you now, and what's next for you now?
Well, I just had both knees replaced on the
Ooh.
same day at the same time, which is a pretty rare thing. My doctor thought I was strong enough. I did it 3 weeks ago. Uh, if you follow me on social, I'm kind of taking people through my rehab and recovery in real time. 1 week after my surgery, I was able to do a mile on crutches in 33 and a half minutes. 2 weeks after the surgery, I did 4 miles with a 27-minute per mile average. And just today, I did 5 miles with a 19-minute average, no cane, no crutches.
Whoa.
which is, my PT guy and the doctor, I'm running all this by them. I'm not doing this as rogue. Like I don't want to go backwards. But, I have a saying, you get the mind right and the fill in the blank will follow.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, running, the miles will follow. The money will follow. The relationships will follow. So my latest book is called Adversitology, Overcoming Adversity When You're Hanging On by a Thread. So what was an adversity 3 weeks ago, brand new knees, is now an opportunity. So the energy, the vibrational frequency with which I'm getting fed back by this opportunity rather than an adversity is what's expediting my healing process. And ultimately, I want to be a guy that runs Badwater on 2 replaced knees, because nobody's done that before. I do that at 60 years old or older. I'm 60 now. That kind of thing will still quietly drive me. Quietly, because when I was a kid and even into my 30s, I might needed to have that mainline adrenaline rush. I just need a drip every now and then, just a small. I'm too old to need that rush, but a drip in the form of either that physical aspiration, what we're doing in North Carolina as the aspiration, what we just finished. And like when I do a book tour, this last book tour, we didn't go to just TV stations and radio stations and podcasts. We went to, in 26 days, 27 cities in 26 days, homeless shelters, soup kitchens, food pantries, detention centers, abused women's facilities, veterans facilities, treatment centers, delivering the message of hope. Because when you're going through a physical, financial, relational, spiritual adversity, you're hanging on by a thread. Mm-hmm. And that book, Adversitology, which is a made-up word, which is the study of adversity, will get you through your adversities quicker and with less pain. I can't help you avoid them, but I can help you get them through, get you through them quicker. That's kind of where I'm at now with my life, is through the books and through the book tours and through the speaking and stuff. It's time not just to give back money to Haiti and all that. It's just, all the knowledge. It's incumbent upon me to push that back out there and let people take what they want.
Well, you got a lot of it to give, and we're going to put how to contact you, all the different ways in your books in our show notes. Thank you so much for joining us. I feel like we could do 5 different podcasts on, I'd love to just geek out on Badwater for an hour another time, but and just hearing a journey of one of those races start to finish is nuts. But thank you so much. Thanks for everything that you're doing to make us all better leaders and make the world a better place. Thank you, Frank.
Listen, if this resonates with your listeners and you want to do something like that, because I give a talk called The Insurmountable, Incomprehensible, The Impossible, and I use Badwater as a metaphor to help you find your life's Badwater, I would love to devote time to what it takes to get to the starting line. Because it's an invitation-only race. Only 100 people are invited. This year, there was 26 countries represented at that start line. What it takes to get to the start line, let alone see the finish line. It's a great metaphor for life.
Love it. Thank you so much, Frank. Get well with those knees. I guess you're already, halfway there, but pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you, sir.